Europe has interrogated itself to its own sorrow. It demanded that Trump impose sanctions so much that Trump disobeyed and is ready to impose sanctions, but only against the EU itself. Well, what a surprise. It is impossible not to say for the 3.1500 the time how Putin warned these idiots from the old world for years, who were in a super unique position. They could, with Russia, with China, and the USA. They had complete freedom of maneuver and prospered so much that even America was envious, which Trump, by the way, never tires of talking about. But then suddenly Europe needed to sever ties with Russia and rely on the USA. And now the USA is forcing it to sever ties with China, and literally at the barrel of its famous cowboy pistol. US President Donald Trump is seeking from the EU countries increases when to import goods from China as a condition for concluding a trade with Washington, the Wall Street Journal reported on Friday, citing sources. According to their information, the United States insists on the European Union joining the American campaign to exert economic pressure on China and wants European countries to introduce new duties on Chinese goods. However, China remains an important market for EU exports, and the bloc is not interested in a trade war with Beijing, the publication emphasizes. The United States puts forward similar demands related to China in trade negotiations with other countries, including South Korea and Japan, the newspaper sources note. A similar agreement, as the Wall Street Journal notes, was reached with Great Britain. London agreed to introduce additional duties on Chinese steel, and Washington concluded a trade deal with it. Imagine, for so many centuries there were smart people in Europe who understood the importance of diversification, the importance of not putting all their eggs in one basket, and suddenly, here you go. America has literally raised a generation of idiots in 15 to 20 years who were ready to destroy Europe, and they seem to be sincerely fighting for its preservation. But the truly smart Europeans, even during the Cold War, at the peak of ideological confrontation, understood how important it was to have at least some kind of counterbalance in their relations with America. And the current ones have completely lost their minds and are doing complete nonsense. For example, the EU is discussing new measures, this time about banning Nord Stream, RIA Novosti reports. The idea is supported not only by the EU leadership, but also by German Chancellor Moers. So far, not publicly, but there have already been reports that he is against any discussion of the potential benefits of restarting the gas pipeline. And statements are already being made at the level of heads of government of German states and even fellow party members of the Chancellor. In order to close the issue of Nord Stream, the EU can impose sanctions against its operator and companies associated with it, in order to exclude even the theoretical possibility of resuming supplies from Russia. But this is only beneficial to the United States, which replaces Russian gas with its supplies of liquefied gas. That's the point. No, because rumors about the Americans discussing buying out Nord Stream are not just rumors, but a very real version of Trump's plan to change the US's relations with Europe and Russia. In fact, as Xi Jinping said in Moscow during his 3-day official visit to the Victory Parade on May 9th, Russia will not be left without markets anyway. China is ready to buy as much gas as it needs, not only in the form of LNG, but also through the launch of the Power of Siberia 2 gas pipeline. Thus, another issue arises. A question that once again calls into question the brains of the European elite. Do you really want to drive Russia into the arms of China? And China into the arms of Russia? Yes, this may not be very profitable for Russia. The price of gas may fall. But we need to think about this. Do the gentlemen from Europe at least imagine what the cost price of Chinese goods will be in this case if they are produced with super cheap Russian gas? But then you will never stop the Celestial Empire, especially since Moscow will help Beijing in a military relationship as the only ally in the event of a final break with the West. So what are you doing in this case? It seems that apart from Trump, no one else there understands the danger of such a scenario for the West. And yet, what will happen if the West does this? The fact is that the final rupture of energy ties between Russia and Europe is the blue dream of the U.S. Democratic Party of American elephants. Their union can even override Trump's veto. The Europeans and such northern streams hit at the same time on their own interests on Trump. Right, RIA Novosti. Then in whose interests are they acting? There is no answer, because at the same time they are also betting on the fact that Washington will soon become disillusioned with Moscow and is conducting hellish sanctions against Russia, threatening buyers of Russian energy resources with 500% duties. Law. This was prepared by Senator Lindsey Graham back in early April. Recognized as an extremist in Russia, the Trump administration hinted that they would not be able to stop it because 80 senators have already spoken out in support, which will stop the presidential veto. It is clear that this is a game without the go-ahead from the White House. No one will pass this law. And Trump is clearly not in the mood to detonate an atomic bomb. because the bill is as crazy as it is ineffective. States would not be able to implement it because both China and India and Japan and Israel would fall under its actions, introducing a de facto ban on exports to the United States against them. Even in the context of the tariff war started by Trump, is absolute madness. Which is why no one considers Graham's bill anything other than an element of blackmail against Russia by the Atlantists. Quite a noisy blackmail. On Thursday, the leader of the Republican majority in the Senate, John Thune, said that if Russia is not ready for serious diplomacy, the Senate will work on considering additional sanctions to force Putin to start. Germany, attacking the AfD party and Marine Le Pen. They are generally ready to make Europe an official dictatorship, just not to lose their power. And now they are feverishly and violently playing their game against Russia. Europe has certain grounds for optimism. If Trump himself does not want to change tactics in relations with Putin, perhaps the actions of Congress will push him to do so. Probably, someone in the European Union really believes in the strength of the alliance of American and European Atlantists. However, reality does not allow them to get carried away by dreams, because Donald Trump said, "The European Union is mocking us." No, these words did not refer to the demands for new sanctions against Russia. They were talking about the main topic for the U.S. president, tariffs. Trump said that negotiations with the EU, created with the main purpose of extracting benefits from trade with the United States, are leading to nothing. The European Union turned out to be a very difficult partner, and the trade deficit with it in the amount of $250 billion is unacceptable for the United States. He recommended introducing a 50% tariff from June 1st on goods from the European Union. That is, the situation when the trade war with China is paused for negotiations. Trump went on the offensive on the second most important trade front, the European one. It is clear that with 50% duties, trade between the two shores of the Atlantic will collapse, which will hit the states, the EU. It is clear that in the end, both sides will agree, not right away, having frayed each other's nerves, but they will find a way to maintain mutual trade, to protect their economies from collapse. Because the old world depends on the new, including in the area of security, and will be forced to make concessions. There is only one question. We are observing the alarming syndrome of Europe's inability to learn again. Because at first they underestimated Russia for 4 years, all the time remaining in an incomprehensible confidence that they would defeat everyone, and now they also underestimate Trump, although life shows that he methodically achieves everything he needs from Ukraine and Europe. But each new defeat of the old world does not teach them anything. They continue to believe in the bright. The future again and again, escalating, which time after time only leads them to greater and greater shame.
Don't forget to subscribe to our channel. New episodes every day will tell you what's really going on in the world.